Hey crew, it's Ben, and I'm back with another Bible study. Today we are going to be diving back into the book of Second Kings, but before we begin, if you are new here, if you are unfamiliar with what is going on, I hold some unconventional beliefs and I am doing an unconventional Bible study. I suggest you start at the beginning. For everybody else who have been following along, let's dive back into Second Kings 8 because we left off in Second Kings 7. Oh, we're just going to dive into the text and see where it leads today, right? Now, Elijah had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, we talked extensively about that. Arise, you and your household, go and live as a foreigner wherever you can, for the Lord has decreed a 7-year famine, and it has already come to the land. And so the woman proceeded to do as the man of God had instructed, and she and her household lived as foreigners for 7 years in the land of the Philistines. At the end of the 7 years, when the woman returned from the land of the Philistines, she went to the king to appeal for her house and her land. Now, the king had been speaking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, saying, "Please relate to me all the great things Elisha has done." And Gehazi was telling the king how Elijah had brought the dead back to life. Just then the woman whose son Elijah had revived came to appeal to the king for her house and her land. So Gehazi said, "My lord the king, this is the woman, and this is the son Elisha restored to life." And when the king asked the woman, she confirmed it. So the king appointed for her an officer, saying, "Restore all that was hers, along with the proceeds of the fields, from the day that she left the country until now." Now that's a little bit hard to enforce, right? I guess you could just give from the treasury, but like you give the land back, yeah, they have provisions for that. But how do you provide the what harvest? It was a famine. There was no harvest. It was fallow land. She wasn't living there. Did somebody take over the land immediately when she left? Is that what happened? Why? These questions aren't answered. But these are the questions that I ask as I'm reading through it. And this whole point of putting this in here doesn't make a whole lot of sense other than to reinforce that yes, he had done this miracle before. All right, now let's get into the thick of it. Into the thick of it. When Elisha came to Damascus, while Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, was sick, and the king was told, "The man of God has come here." And so the king said to Hazael, "Take a gift in your hand, go to meet the man of God, and inquire of the Lord through him. Will I recover from this illness?" So Hazael went to meet Elisha, taking with him a gift of 40 cameloads of every good thing from Damascus. And he went in and stood before him and said, "Your son, Ben-Hadad, king of Aram, has sent me to ask, will I recover from this illness?" And Elisha answered, "Go and tell him, you will surely recover. But the Lord has shown me that in fact he will die." And Elisha fixed his gaze steadily upon him until Hazael became uncomfortable, and then the man of God began to weep. You walk up with 40 camel loads of goods from the king, and you ask the man of God, saying, "Man of God, what should I go and tell the king?" And the answer is not, "You will surely die," which is what's going to happen. The prophet of the Lord, who just happened to be in Damascus, I'm sure, he conspired this, right? He goes and he tells him, "Go and tell him he's going to live, but God said he's going to die." And then he holds his gaze, and then he starts crying. It's manipulation. And then the man of God began to weep. "And why is my Lord weeping?" asked Hazael. "Because I know the evil you will do to the Israelites." Elisha replied, "You will set fire to their fortresses, kill their young men with the sword, dash their little ones to pieces, and rip open their pregnant women. But how could your servant, a mere dog, do such a monstrous thing?" said Hazael. And then Elisha answered, "The Lord has shown me that you will be king over Aram." And so Hazael left Elisha and went to his master, who asked him, "What did Elisha say to you?" And he replied, "He told me that you would surely recover." But the next day Hazael took a thick cloth, dipped it in water, and spread it over the king's face. And so Ben-Hadad died, and Hazael reigned in his place. He died exactly like the prophet told you to kill him. Now, that's put off as the will of God, right? God decreed that this man is going to be in charge of Aram because he is a bloodthirsty man who is going to do bloodthirsty things to the children of God in Israel. And that's going to make them turn back to him. Right? Let's see what happens. And in the 5th year of the reign of Joram, son of Ahab, over Israel, Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, succeeded his father as king of Judah. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem for 8 years. So he made it to 40. And Jehoram walked in the ways of the kings of Israel, just as the house of Ahab had done, for he married a daughter of Ahab, and did evil in the sight of the Lord. Yet, for the sake of his servant David, the Lord was unwilling to destroy Judah, since he had promised to maintain a lamp for David and his descendants forever, if they kept to the covenant, which, David never did. So, not according to the covenant as it was given. We've covered this extensively, and I'm not really going to hammer it too hard today. But it is always important to note that David was a bloodthirsty thug who, yes, conquered the land and did so in a very, very bloody way, right? And he led in a very heavy-handed, bloody way, and he received tribute from a lot of places because they were terrified of that heavy hand, and that is all true. But he did not hold to the covenant of God. He did not keep the commandments at all. He was covetous, he was adulterous, he lied, he stole, he committed murder. He was a very bad man. He was not in any way redeemed before he died. As a matter of fact, he went out pretty much the same way he lived, ruthlessly. His son Solomon did not follow the ways of God. He really did not. We did not see that. That was not part of the witness of the Bible. Now, we are gaslit into thinking that. It tells you that you should think this bit about this situation. But, no. Again, idolatry. Again, harlotry. Again, deception. Heavy-handedness. Deliberately doing what the kings were prohibited from doing and going back to Egypt to get horses and chariots and to sell them. That's where the money came for the temple, right? And so he wasn't doing the battle. He was facilitating the trade of the arms. He was an arms dealer. And he did not keep the commandments of God. He built a temple, yes. But he did it in a way that was really not supposed to happen. Not if you look back at the forefathers and how the actual command to worship was put down. They were not supposed to hew rocks with hammers. It doesn't matter that they did it over there and you can't hear it. You weren't supposed to build a house, but you, in your vanity, you decided God needed one. And then, it was vanity that led to the tabernacle, much less the first and second temples. God is beyond the ability to dwell in a house. He's everything that makes up the house. Yes, you can go in there and worship him. And you can, through acts of faith, come face to face with him in a house of worship. But that's not his house. He doesn't live there any more than he lives in my house. He has full access. I worship him completely and totally. He could do whatever, but he is everything. He's not inside. He's not poking around. He's not writing down your rights and wrongs. He is all of these things. And so, the whole he had promised to make a lamp for David and his descendants forever, I hold extreme exception to. Especially doing this, right? This. Up until now, Judah has somewhat maintained kind of lip service to God, but not now. Now they are every bit as complicit as the kingdom of Samaria. I mean, Israel is. Like, they haven't been Israel for a couple of generations. That hasn't been a thing. Now, there may be pockets of Judaism in it, but overall, the rulership for several generations has not. The same goes now for Judah. Judah turned from God here. This is turning from God. This is not following the ways. And what does God do? He rewards them. He keeps that lamp lit because David shed a lot of blood, y'all. Tens of thousands. David and his tens of thousands. And why is that important? We'll get into that. And in the days of Jehoram, Edom rebelled against the hand of Judah and appointed their own king. Now this is south of the Dead Sea, right? We're not going to pull it up again, but we did. It was Edom and Moab and Israel and Judah, right? The four cardinal directions there, pretty much. Well, Edom is the south, and they were the ones that helped when Moab rebelled. It was Edom that went with them. Okay. So Jehoram crossed over to Zaire with all his chariots. And when the Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, he rose up and attacked by night. His troops, however, fled to their homes. And so, to this day, Edom has been in a rebellion against the hand of Judah. Likewise, Libnah rebelled at the same time. Now, remember back in Exodus and into Leviticus, Edom and Moab were granted their lands. But then as we got farther along, they became, forced subservience. Like, we're not going to technically take your land, but everything that you produce is going to be heavily taxed by us, and you will pay us tribute, or we will wade in your blood. Like, that was the deal, right? That's how they handle things. That's how David got his start. You're going to pay me some protection, and I'll take care of you, And so this is the same thing. And Edom's like, you know what? They look kind of weak. We're going to quit paying you. We're gonna keep the production to ourselves. You are a foreign government, and we're going to establish our own. But that's rebellion. For these people to take control of their own lives, that's rebellion. To not be subject to these people who came in and destroyed everybody who lived here except your people. They enslaved your people. It is rebellion for your people to want to be free. How can you not understand that? How can you not see that it is their divine right to take the products of your labor? It is their divine right. It has been declared by God Almighty Himself that everything you produce is theirs. And they let you keep some of it out of the kindness of their heart. As long as you work hard and you don't resist, then you get to keep part of your stuff. And so to this day, Edom has been in rebellion against the hand of Judah. And likewise, Libnah rebelled at the same time. As for the rest of the acts of Jehoram, along with all of his accomplishments, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? And Jehoram rested with his fathers and was buried with them in the city of David. And his son Ahaziah reigned in his place in the 12th year of the reign of Joram, son of Ahab, over Israel. Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, became king of Judah. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year. His mother's name was Athaliah, the granddaughter of Omri, king of Israel. So he got to live to be 23. And Ahaziah walked in the ways of the house of Ahab and did evil in the sight of the Lord, like the house of Ahab. For he was a son-in-law of the house of Ahab. And then Ahaziah went with Joram, son of Ahab, to fight against Hazael, king of Aram, at Ramoth Gilead. And the Arameans wounded Joram. So Joram returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds that the Arameans had inflicted upon him at Ramah. when he fought against at Ramah, when he fought against Hazael, king of Aram. And then Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, king of Judah, went down to Jezreel to visit Joram, son of Ahab, because Joram had been wounded. Okay, so let's review that real quick, right? So, in the 12th year of the reign of Joram, Ahaziah becomes the king, and then he was keeping the practices of not Israel. He was keeping the practices of the kingdom of Samaria. And so he walks in those ways, and he does evil in the sight of Ahab, for he was a son-in-law. And then he goes with Joram, son of Ahab, to fight against Hazael. This is in his first year. And the Arameans wound the son of Ahab. And so Joram returns to Jezreel to recover from the wounds. All right, now, this is a slight shift in the narrative, and we come back to it. So, now, Elisha the prophet summoned one of the sons of the prophet and said to him, "Tuck your cloak under your belt. Take this flask of oil and go to Ramoth Gilead. When you arrive, look for Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi. Go in, get him away from his companions, and take him to the inner room. Then take the flask of oil and pour it on his head and declare, 'This is what the Lord says. I anoint you king over Israel.' Then open the door and run. Do not delay." So the young prophet went to Ramoth Gilead, and when he arrived, the army's commanders were sitting there. "I have a message for you, commander," he said. "For which of us?" asked Jehu. "For you, commander," he replied. So Jehu got up and went into the house, where the young prophet poured the oil on his head and declared, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I anoint you over the Lord's people, Israel. And you are to strike down the house of your master Ahab, so that I may avenge the blood of my servants, the prophets, and the blood of all the servants of the Lord shed by the hand of Jezebel. The whole house of Ahab will perish, and I will cut off from Ahab every male, both slave and free, in Israel. I will make the house of Ahab like the houses of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and Baasha, son of Ahijah. And on the plot of ground at Jezreel, the dogs will devour Jezebel, and there will be no one to bury her." And then the young prophet opened the door and ran. And when Jehu went out to the servants of his master, they asked, "Is everything all right? Why did this man come to you?" You know this kind in their babble," he replied. "That is a lie," they said. "You tell us now." So Jehu answered. He talked to me about this and that, and he said, "This is what the Lord says. I anoint you king over Israel." And quickly each man took his garment and put it under Jehu on the bare steps. And then they blew the ram's horn and proclaimed, "Jehu is king." I do take slight exception here, right? Because not with the response. This response right here is the first time that we have actually seen people respond to the anointing of God in an immediate sense, to the direction of God in an immediate sense. But the prophet of God sends a representative. Okay. And then he drags him off, anoints him in secret, and takes off running. If God's going to declare it, why is it not boldly? In this instance, if not in the case of David, this is the man that is going to reclaim Israel. Right? We're going to get rid of Samaria. We're going to be Israel. But we're not going to do it straight out. The prophet of God, Elisha, is not going to walk up and say, "You are anointed." He's going to send someone else to anoint him in secret and then have that man say that I was anointed. If you're going to anoint him, there should be a witness. God is bold. God is not calling you to hide and do subterfuge. In my estimation, I know that this is just me nitpicking. This is not one of the big major doctrinal things, right? This is a recording of a history a long time ago. This is more of a me personally picking beef, okay, but it's still a problem. God knew what the response was going to be. These men right here are going to immediately do what they're supposed to do. Why not do the anointing in front of them? Why not boldly proclaim what God has proclaimed you to do instead of anoint in secret and run away? Thus, Jehu, son of Jehoshaphat, the son of Nimshi, conspired against Joram. Now, Joram and all of Israel had been defending Ramoth Gilead against Hazael, king of Aram. But King Joram had returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds he had suffered at the hands of the Arameans in the battle against Hazael the king. So Jehu said, "If you commanders wish to make me king, then do not let anyone escape from the city to go and tell it in Jezreel." And then Jehu got into his chariot and went to Jezreel, because Joram was laid up there, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, had gone down to see him. Now, the watchman standing in the tower in Jezreel saw Jehu's troops approaching, and he called out, "I see a company of troops." "Choose a rider," Joram commanded. "Send him out to meet them and ask, 'Have you come in peace?'" So a horseman rode off to meet Jehu and said, "This is what the king asked. Have you come in peace?" "What do you know about peace?" Jehu replied. "Fall in behind me." And the watchman reported, "The messenger reached them, but he is not coming back." So the king sent out a second horseman, who went to them and said, "This is what the king asked. Have you come in peace?" "What do you know about peace?" Jehu replied. "Fall in behind me." And again the watchman reported, "He reached them, but he is not coming back. And the charioteer is driving like Jehu, son of Nimshi. He is driving like a madman." Well, that's interesting. Apparently this is a well-known man. He seems to be quite bold. "Harness!" Joram shouted, and they harnessed his chariot. And then Joram, king of Israel, and Ahaziah, king of Judah, set out, each in his own chariot, and met Jehu on the property of Naboth the Jezreelite. And when Joram saw Jehu, he asked, "Have you come in peace, Jehu?" "How can there be peace," he replied, "as long as the idolatry and witchcraft of your mother Jezebel abound?" And Joram turned around and fled, calling out to Ahaziah, "Treachery, Ahaziah!" Now, I don't know how it's treachery if this was not your ally, right? You went out to meet him, okay, maybe you knew him, but you sent out 2 horsemen to see if he was coming in peace. He didn't, so you got a chariot. How's it treachery? And then Jehu drew his bow and shot Joram between the shoulders. The arrow pierced his heart, and he slumped down in his chariot. And Jehu said to Bidkar, his officer, "Pick him up and throw him in the field of Naboth the Jezreelite. And remember that when you and I were riding together behind his father Ahab, the Lord lifted up this burden against him. As surely as I saw the blood of Naboth and the blood of his sons yesterday, declares the Lord, so will I repay you on this plot of ground, declares the Lord. And then, according to the word of the Lord, pick him up and throw him on the plot of ground." And when King Ahaziah of Judah saw this, he fled up the road towards Beth Hagan. And Jehu persuaded him, "Shoot him too." So they shot Ahaziah in his chariot on the ascent of Gur, near Ibleam, and he fled to Megiddo and died there. Then his servants carried him by chariot to Jerusalem and buried him with his fathers in the tomb of the city of David. In the 11th year of Joram, son of Ahab, Ahaziah had become king over Judah. So Jehu rides up carelessly, right? He is speeding along in his chariot with several people, and they send out a messenger, and the messenger gets taken. And then they send out another messenger, and the messenger gets taken. So these 2 men by themselves decide to go out. Now, they probably had guards, of course, but these 2 men go out, and then they get shot in the back, both of them. That's interesting. That's some valiant combat right there. Now, I understand conquest. I understand treachery. I understand bloodshed. I understand all of these things. Treachery, Ahaziah. Why? Why would it be treachery unless you had agreed to talk peaceably? And then that was not the case. That would be the only reason why these two men would go out. In my estimation, right? I get for me, unless there was an agreed to talk, I'm not going out there. And then there's treachery, and they both get shot in the back, and one of them manages to escape to Jericho and then dies. So both Israel and Judah now have no king. And when Jehu arrived in Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it. So she painted her eyes, adorned her head, and looked down from a window. And as Jehu entered the gate, she asked, "Have you come in peace, O Zimri, murderer of your master?" And he looked up at the window and called out, "Who is on my side? Who?" And 2 or 3 eunuchs looked down at him. "Throw her down," yelled Jehu. So they threw her down, and her blood splattered on the wall and on the horses as they trampled her underfoot. And then Jehu went in and ate and drank. "Take care of this cursed woman," he said, "and bury her, for she was the daughter of a king." But when they went out to bury her, they found nothing but her skull, her feet, and the palms of her hands. So they went back and told Jehu, who replied, "This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke through his servant Elijah the Tishbite. On the plot of ground at Jezreel, the dogs will devour the flesh of Jezebel, and Jezebel's body will lie like dung in the field on the plot of ground at Jezreel, so that no one can say, 'This is Jezebel.'" Now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria. So Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the officials of Jezreel, to the elders, and to the guardians of the sons of Ahab, saying, "When this letter arrives, since your master's sons are with me, and you have chariots and horses, a fortified city and weaponry, select the best and most worthy son of your master, and set him on his father's throne, and fight for your master's house." But they were terrified and reasoned, "If 2 kings could not stand against him, how can we?" And so the palace administrator, the overseer of the city, and elders, and the guardians sent a message to Jehu. "We are your servants, and we will do whatever you say. We will not make anyone king. Do whatever is good in your sight." So Jehu wrote them a second letter and said, "If you are on my side, and if you will obey me, then bring me the heads of your master's sons to me at Jezreel by this time tomorrow." And now the sons of the king, 70 in all, were being brought up by the leading men of the city. And when the letter arrived, they took the sons of the king and slaughtered all 70 of them. They put their heads in a basket and sent them to Jehu at Jezreel. And when the messenger arrived, he told Jehu, "They have brought the heads of the sons of the king." And Jehu ordered, "Pile them into 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until morning." And the next morning Jehu went out and stood before all the people and said, "You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and killed him. But who has killed these? Know then that not a word the Lord has spoken against the house of Ahab will fail. For the Lord has done what he has promised through his servant Elijah." And so Jehu killed everyone in Jezreel who remained of the house of Ahab, as well as all his great men and close friends and priests, leaving him without a single survivor. So what do we have? We have a great sacrifice. We have a lot of blood. First, right? He has 70 sons, and they're being gathered, so they're already in captivity. And he says, instead of "deliver them to me," "deliver me their heads." And so they do. They cut off the heads of the person that they swore to serve. It's not a nice thing, but it happens. Conquest is real. And when you are being conquered, you will do things that you never thought that you would. That is a reality. And so these people, in an attempt to spare their own lives, cut off the heads of these 70 men, and they bring them in baskets, and then they pile them on orders on both sides of the entryway. I I'm guessing 35 here and 35 there in a pile. 35 human heads in a pile on each side of the gate. And they wait because that's what they would need to do. And then the next day, they all die. The people who brought the baskets, that's Ahab's men. That was the men who brought the heads. The men who he struck the deal with. They showed up with the heads and then he killed them. He did not leave anybody alive. Because that is what a faithful person does when they are. Now, in that light, that treachery, that makes a difference now, doesn't it? Long live Israel. And then he tells them, you're innocent. It was me who conspired against my master, but who killed these people? So gaslighting and deflection. And so Jehu killed everyone in Jezreel who remained of the house of Ahab, as well as his great men and close friends and priests, leaving him without a single survivor. Yeah, God kept his word. And these people, you are innocent, but who did this? And then Jehu set out towards Samaria, at Beth-eked of the shepherds. And Jehu met some relatives of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and asked, who are you? We are relatives of Ahaziah, they answered, and we have come down to greet the sons of the king and the queen mother. And then Jehu ordered, take them alive. So his men took them alive, and then slaughtered them at the well of Beth-eked, 42 men. He spared none of them. And when he left there, he found Jehonadab, son of Rechab, who was coming to greet him. And Jehu greeted him and asked, is your heart as true to mine as my heart is to yours? It is, Jehonadab replied. If it is, give me your hand. And so he gave him his hand, and Jehu helped him into his chariot, saying, come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. So he had him ride in his chariot. And when Jehu came to Samaria, he struck down everyone belonging to Ahab who remained there, until he had destroyed them, according to the word that the Lord had spoken to Elijah. And then Jehu brought all the people together and said, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him a lot. Now therefore summon to me all the prophets of Baal, all his servants and all his priests. See that no one is missing, for I have a great sacrifice for Baal. Whoever is missing will not live. But Jehu was acting deceptively in order to destroy the servants of Baal. So Jehu commanded, proclaim a solemn assembly for Baal. So they announced it. And then Jehu sent word throughout Israel. And all the servants of Baal came. There was not a man who failed to show. And they entered the temple of Baal, and it was filled from end to end. And Jehu said to the keeper of the wardrobe, bring out garments for all the servants of Baal. So he brought out garments for them. And next, Jehu and Jehonadab, son of Rechab, entered the temple of Baal. And Jehu said to the servants of Baal, look around to see that there are no servants of the Lord here among you, only servants of Baal. And they went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now, Jehu had stationed 80 men outside and warned them, if anyone allows one of the men I am delivering into your hands to escape, he will forfeit his life for theirs. And when he had finished making the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guards and officers, go in and kill them, do not let anyone out. And so the guards and officers put them to the sword, and threw the bodies out, and went into the inner rooms of the temple of Baal. And they brought out the sacred pillar of the temple of Baal, and burned it. They also demolished the sacred pillar of Baal, and they tore down the temple of Baal, and made it into a latrine, which it is to this day. Thus, Jehu eradicated Baal from Israel, but he did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam, son of Nebat, had caused Israel to commit, the worship of golden calves at Bethel and Dan. Say what? Say what? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? How is that even a possibility? If he was willing to wade through this much blood to do what God told him to do, did God not tell him to get rid of those cows? Did he not tell him to get rid of those idols? Was that not a commandment that came from God to this man who was willing to do this? Like David was willing to do this. Jehu is willing to do this. He is willing to wade through this blood. He killed a lot of people. A lot of people. In service to God, as is required. That bloody sacrifice has to happen. But he did a sacrifice before he did a sacrifice. How about that? It is interesting to note that, again, this plague that kills the servants of Baal was a plague of swords. That's a common one to be used. And they don't call it a plague, but I am, because I'm tying it back to Exodus. And it's not a man sitting and 50 troops walk up and he calls down fire and kills them. That was not long ago. You have a double portion of that spirit. Call down and burn them in the name of the Lord. Show the might of your Lord to the God. There's no preparation here, though. There's no setup here, and there's no entity hanging around. Now, it's possible that he could have only got 50 of them, and maybe that's why. Maybe he wanted to get them all. Okay. It's just interesting that, once again, it's the blood being spilled that is important. And after they soak this entire room in blood, then they bring out the pillar and they burn it. And thus is Jehu eradicated Baal from Israel. And I'm never promoting Baal worship by any means. I'm just saying that if he is willing to walk this far, and he has walked pretty far, that is a very bloody path, how does this continue? How is this okay? Nevertheless, the Lord said to Jehu, because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my sight and done in the house of Ahab all that was in my heart, 4 generations of your sons will sit on the throne of Israel. Yet Jehu was not careful to follow the instructions of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn away from the sins that Jeroboam had caused Israel to commit. In those days, the Lord began to reduce the size of Israel. Hazael defeated the Israelites throughout their territory, from the Jordan eastward through all the land of Gilead, the region of Gad, Reuben, and Manasseh, and from Aror by the Arnon Valley through Gilead to Bashan. That's pretty much everywhere that they conquered first before they came into the promised land. But it is also important to note that this is not when this began to happen. It had already begun to happen. They had already lost the land prior to Hazael. Not as much. They lost more, that is true, but that is not when he began to reduce the size of Israel. Israel began to be reduced when they were split in twain. When it became Israel and Judah, the lands was reduced. And then, when Israel really became Samaria, the land was severely reduced. And so, the land that they controlled as Israel was not as extensive already as the land controlled by Solomon. So the Lord had already begun to reduce the land. It's another one of those little nitpicky things that I stick on, but I stick on them. And as for the rest of the acts of Jehu, along with all his accomplishments and all his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel? And Jehu rested with his fathers and was buried in Samaria, and his son Jehoahaz reigned in his place. So the duration of Jehu's reign over Israel and Samaria was 28 years. And that's where we're going to wrap this one up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion, right? But it is important to note also that despite the fact that he is not continuing on, like he didn't even receive the command to follow the instructions of the Lord. He said, because you have done and killed all of these people and destroyed the worship of Baal, which of course is a great thing, right? If you look into Baal worship, which we're not going to dive into here, that's a very terrible thing. It definitely needed to go away. I'm just saying that the alternative might not have been much better. And I know that that tends to step on toes, but it is not intentional. I am pointing out the simple fact that every single time somebody is doing the will of the Lord, they are wading through blood. Right? When they're being rewarded and their generations are being rewarded, it is not because they are keeping the commandments or the covenant. It is because they are conquering territory and doing things in the name of the God of Israel. That's a big problem for me. It doesn't have to be for you, but it is for me. And so I naturally step on toes, but I don't do it on purpose. I can't apologize for it because it's just the way it's working out. I didn't intend for it to happen. I don't apologize for it. I'm not really trying to pick a fight, right? We're going through this and we're exposing what is in here because for a large part it is not exactly the way that I remember it. What I am reading is not the way I remember the stories being taught in Sunday school or preached at a sermon. The parts that are important, these wading through blood parts, that's glossed over in order that you can find redemption at the end, son. And that's another big problem for me. And I get that might not be for you, and that's cool. I'm just here trying to do what I'm being told to do, and so it is what it is. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you, God loves you, and you're perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. This has been Fit State. Peace.